Have you ever felt like fate was leading you to a place where your heart would both break and begin to heal? Rain fell steadily over the century-old pecan trees of hill country, Texas, as Grace Bennett stepped through the weathered gates of the Monroe Ranch, clutching a worn-out suitcase and a promise made to her family back in Ohio. What she didn't know was that the desperate job she'd taken, caring for a man who had lost both the will to live and the use of his legs, would alter the course of her life forever. Between the wounded pride of a rancher confined to a wheelchair and the unshakable dignity of a woman willing to do anything for the people she loves, a story would unfold where the deepest scars were the ones you couldn't see. Because sometimes, in the most unexpected places and under the hardest circumstances, we find not just the means to survive, but the nourishment our souls were starving for. The rain was relentless when the cab pulled up to the imposing front of the Monroe Ranch. Grace stared through the fogged-up window at the stone facade and towering pines that lined the driveway. A knot tightened in her stomach. This was her last shot. "That'll be $56, ma'am," said the driver, an older man with a thick southern drawl. Grace fumbled through her purse, counting the cash with quiet desperation. It barely covered the fare. "First time in Texas?" he asked. "First, and hopefully the last," she replied with a forced smile, dragging her battered suitcase into the rain. The creaky gate swung open to reveal a stern older woman with her silver hair pulled into a severe bun. "Grace Bennett? You're late. I'm Mrs. Carmichael, the housekeeper." The entry hall was wide and shadowed, lined with oil portraits of grim ancestors that seemed to follow her with their eyes. The dark wood beams and old tile floors whispered of faded glory. "I'm not a nurse. I have a degree in fine arts," Grace protested as Mrs. Carmichael explained her duties. "Mr. Monroe doesn't want pity. He wants silence and reliability," the woman said flatly. "You'll have food, a room, and the agreed salary. Everything else is none of my concern." Grace left her suitcase in a corner, nervously smoothing her skirt. The next room was dimly lit, a dying fire casting flickers across the floor. A wheelchair stood near a large window overlooking the ranch. "Mr. Monroe is waiting," Mrs. Carmichael announced before disappearing down the hall. Grace stepped in cautiously. "Mr. Monroe, I'm Grace Bennett, your new—" "I know who you are," said a low voice from the chair. "The desperate girl from Ohio." Andrew Monroe turned to face her. He was in his early 40s, ruggedly handsome, despite the unkempt beard and deep shadows under his eyes. His piercing green gaze met hers with cool detachment. "Think you can stomach what's left of a man?" he asked bitterly. Grace stood tall, meeting his stare. "I watched my father waste away for years, sir. It's not your broken body I'm afraid of, it's your unbroken pride." A flicker of surprise crossed Andrew's face. "Mrs. Carmichael will explain the routine. My physical therapist comes 3 times a week, the rest of the time—" He paused. "You'll try to keep me from rotting in this chair." "I understand," she replied. "No, you don't," he said, turning to the window. "Tomorrow we start with my morning bath. Hope you've got the stomach for it." That night, in her small, whitewashed room, Grace unpacked her few belongings. She pulled out a photo of a smiling girl beside an old man. "I'm doing this for you," she whispered, tracing the glass. The tears she'd held back all day finally spilled as she listened to the rain sweeping across the fields. In the main house, Andrew Monroe sat alone, watching the same storm, imprisoned in metal and memories. "Tomorrow is a new day," Grace thought, wiping her tears, "and I'm stronger than his bitterness." Outside, the storm raged on, unaware that 2 wounded souls had just met under the century-old roof of the Monroe Ranch. The sunrise brought a clear, crisp sky, so different from the thunderstorm the night before. Sunlight slipped in through half-shut blinds as Grace gently knocked on Andrew's door. "Come in," came his voice, raspier than yesterday. She entered with clean towels and a basket of toiletries. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and a man who hadn't left it in too long. Andrew sat on the bed, shirtless, his upper body still bearing the strength of someone who'd once worked long hours with horses before his legs gave out. "Good morning, Mr. Monroe. I've got everything ready for your bath." He glared at her, eyes bloodshot from a sleepless night. "Did you sleep well in Hell's guest room?" "I've slept in worse places," she said, approaching to help him up. The moment she touched him, he pushed her hand away. "Get out of my room," he barked. "I'd rather rot than be seen like this." "But sir, I have to help. I said get out," he yelled, hurling a glass at the wall. It shattered loudly. "You think I need your sympathy? Think I don't see the way you look at me?" Grace stepped back but didn't leave. "It's not sympathy, Mr. Monroe. It's professionalism. If you don't want help, I'll leave today, but we both know you need someone." Silence filled the room, heavy and electric. Outside, the ranch hands' voices carried on the wind. "You know what they say out there," Grace continued, "that Monroe Ranch is dying, that no one cares for the land anymore." "What do you care?" he spat. "You'll get your check and walk away like all the rest." She walked to the window and pulled open the curtains. Light poured in. Andrew groaned in protest. "My dad had a small garden back in Ohio," she said, eyes on the fields. "He told me plants are like people. If you abandon them, they die." Very poetic. "Now leave." Grace turned to go, but stopped at the door. "I'll be in the kitchen. When you're ready to accept help, you know where to find me." Time passed slowly. Grace used the quiet hours to learn the layout of the house. Mrs. Carmichael showed her the pantry, the servant quarters, and shared stories about the Monroe family, who had owned the ranch for generations. "Mr. Andrew wasn't always like this," the older woman said as they peeled potatoes. "The accident changed everything." That evening, while Grace was preparing dinner, a loud crash echoed through the house, followed by a muffled cry. She ran to Andrew's room and found him on the floor, his wheelchair overturned, desperately reaching for his meds on the nightstand. "Please," he muttered, his face twisted in pain. Without a word, she helped him take the pills, then, with difficulty, got him back into bed. His body trembled from both the pain and the shame. "If you tell anyone what you saw today, you're fired," Andrew whispered, refusing to meet her eyes. "I'm not the kind that talks, Mr. Monroe," she said, straightening the sheets. That night, Grace called home. "How's Mom?" she asked softly. "Same. Maybe worse," her mother answered, voice tired. "Lucy's been asking about you non-stop." "Can I talk to her?" She heard little feet, then a young voice. "Mommy, when are you coming back?" Grace fought back tears. "Soon, sweetheart." "How's Grandpa?" A telling silence. "Mommy, Grandpa forgot who I was again." Grace's heart broke, but her resolve hardened. She needed this job now more than ever. The spring sun bathed the Texas hill country in golden light as Grace stepped into a world unlike anything she'd ever seen. It was the Willow Creek Heritage Festival, and the streets of the nearby town were alive with music, laughter, and tradition. White tents lined the square. Couples danced to bluegrass under strings of fairy lights, and horses trotted through the parade route like something out of an old Western movie. "First time at the Heritage Fest?" asked Mrs. Carmichael, who had invited Grace along to meet the rest of the Monroe family. "We have the Corn Festival back in Ohio. But this is different," Grace replied, adjusting the borrowed sundress that made her feel out of place among the polished southern elegance. "There's the Monroe's tent," Mrs. Carmichael pointed. "Brace yourself, sweetheart. These folks only smile with their mouths." Inside, the Monroe's tent buzzed with energy, laughter, clinking glasses of sweet tea, and the strum of a country guitar. Grace immediately recognized Michael Monroe, Andrew's younger brother. The resemblance was striking, but he lacked Andrew's depth. His charm was polished, practiced. "Carmichael, you old fox," Michael greeted, kissing her cheek before turning to Grace. "And who's this darling thing?" "This is Grace Bennett, your brother's new caretaker," the housekeeper said coolly. Michael looked her over with a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. "So you're the one bathing my big brother. Any progress with the cripple?" "Your brother isn't crippled, Mr. Monroe," Grace replied firmly. He's a man who needs time. Michael chuckled, slipping an arm around her waist. Let's dance. I'll show you how real Texans move. Grace let herself be pulled into a spin. Michael leaned in mid-twirl. You know I've got 3 buyers lined up for the ranch, he whispered. Andy's too proud to admit it's over. Monroe Ranch has been rotting since the accident. You seem very well informed about your brother's finances, she said, trying to keep her step. I'm the only one thinking with his head, he replied. Olives and pecans are out, luxury cabins with sunset views. That's the future. When the music ended, Grace slipped away. In a quiet corner, an elderly woman with sharp eyes was watching her. You must be the Ohio girl, the woman said, motioning her closer. I'm Aunt Rose, Andrew and Michael's great-aunt. Grace sat beside her, grateful for the escape. Your heart's kind. I can see it in your eyes, Rose continued, taking her hands. Andrew has a good heart too, but it's buried deep under hurt. I try to help, but he won't let anyone in. Aunt Rose's voice dropped to a whisper, her gaze shifting toward Michael. The accident wasn't what they told you. Michael was there when that horse threw Andrew. There are things he hides, things that could tear this family apart. A chill ran through Grace. Before she could ask more, her phone buzzed. It was her mother. Lucy has a fever, came her mom's trembling voice. She keeps asking for you. I'll take the first bus home, Grace replied, her world tilting again. The ride back to the ranch was silent. When Mrs. Carmichael dropped her off, Grace headed straight for Andrew's study. I need to talk to you, she said, uninvited. Andrew looked up, surprised. My daughter's sick. I need to go back to Ohio tomorrow. You have a daughter? He asked, genuinely shocked. Lucy. She's 7. She lives with my parents. My father's ill. Alzheimer's. Andrew said nothing, just studied her like he was seeing her for the first time. Go, but come back, he finally said. I need you here. Grace paused at the door, remembering Aunt Rose's words. Why protect someone who wants to take everything from you? Andrew's face darkened. Because the guilt was mine. Not his, he said, almost in a whisper. Now please, leave me alone. A sudden storm swept across the Texas hills that night. Grace had returned from Ohio with dark circles under her eyes, but also a renewed sense of purpose. Lucy's fever had broken, and her father, lost in the fog of Alzheimer's, had briefly recognized her. It was a memory she clung to like gold. The wind howled through the Monroe Ranch, making the trees sway like ghosts. Thunder flashed and growled as Grace walked the hallway with a tray of food, only to stop when she heard a groan from Andrew's room. She found him writhing in bed, jaw clenched in pain. It's my legs, he said through gritted teeth. The humidity wakes the nerves, nature's twisted joke. Did you take your meds? She asked, setting the tray down. They don't work. Nothing does, he muttered, slamming his fist into the mattress. Grace hesitated, then returned with a small glass bottle. My grandma used rosemary oil for pain. I warmed it up. No promises. But it might help. What are you now? A healer? He asked, the usual bite gone from his voice. I'm someone who's watched the people I love suffer. May I? He hesitated, then nodded. Grace rubbed the oil between her hands and gently began massaging his legs. The rosemary scent filled the room, mixing with the storm and earth outside. My wife left when she found out I'd never walk again, Andrew said suddenly, staring at the ceiling. Said she couldn't waste her life on a broken man. Grace kept working in silence, hands moving tenderly across atrophied muscle. Funny, he murmured. I can't feel your hands, but the pain's easing. Sometimes the body remembers what the mind forgets, she whispered. When she finished, Andrew looked calmer, his face finally at peace. The storm still raged, but something quiet and warm settled between them. Tomorrow I'll help you with your bath, Grace said, gathering her things. Andrew, he said softly. My name's Andrew. The next morning the bath was silent, but it was a different kind of silence, not cold or angry but respectful. Grace worked quickly, gently, maintaining his dignity. "Why don't you flinch or look disgusted?" he asked as she dressed him. She paused, then slowly lifted her blouse to show a long scar on her abdomen. "Some wounds you can see hurt less than the ones you can't," she said. "Emergency C-section. Almost lost Lucy. And myself." He stared at her, seeing her in a new light. "And the father." He ran. Said he couldn't handle being a dad to a child who might not make it. A loud clap of thunder shook the house, and the lights flickered out. "Looks like we're in the dark," Andrew said. "I'll get candles." Her hand was already on the doorknob when he stopped her. "Stay a moment. Tell me about Ohio." In the near darkness, Grace spoke softly about orange groves, Lake Erie's wind, the smell of fireworks on the 4th of July. Her voice painted pictures in the room, drawing a fragile bridge between their two broken worlds. Days passed, weaving a delicate thread of routine between Grace and Andrew. One bright morning, she decided to explore the ranch during her break. The land stretched far and wide, rustic fences, fields that smelled of sun-warmed earth, and rows of aging pecan trees whispering in the breeze. She followed a trail toward an old stone building hidden at the edge of the property. Vines crawled up its cracked walls. The heavy wooden door creaked as she pushed it open. Inside, shadows covered what remained of a once busy operation: antique oil presses, rusted machinery, massive barrels still labeled by hand. Dust clung to everything like a second skin. Grace picked up a bottle, wiping the label with her thumb. "Monroe Reserve, Harvest 2020. She turned it in her hands, lost in thought, when a voice made her jump. "The last batch we ever pressed." Andrew sat at the doorway in his chair, holding a weathered photo frame. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry," she said, setting the bottle back. "I used to spend hours in here," he said, wheeling further in. "That oil won Best in State 3 years in a row." He handed her the photograph, a younger Andrew, smiling, holding a trophy. Around him, ranch workers raised bottles in celebration. "It's incredible," Grace said, genuinely impressed. "My granddad used to say olive oil's like wine. Each patch of soil tells its own story." A faint smile flickered on Andrew's lips. "Want to learn?" he asked, surprised by the words as he said them. They spent the afternoon surrounded by gears and ghostly echoes. Andrew explained the varieties of olives, the pressing process, how the soil and weather shaped the flavor. Grace listened closely, asking smart questions, soaking it all in. "The harvest's been cut in half the past few years," Andrew admitted. "No master presser, no hands on the land." "But they're not gone." "Not yet," Grace said, eyes lighting up. "I saw young trees near the northern fence. Some look really healthy." Their conversation was cut short by Grace's phone. Her face went pale when she saw the caller. "Hello, Mrs. Alvarez? What happened?" she asked, stepping outside. The voice on the line was frantic. "Ms. Grace, your father's wandered off. Your mom left Lucy alone to find him. The girl's scared." Grace's breath caught. "Oh, God, please stay with her. I'm coming right now." She hung up and turned to find Andrew watching from the shadows. "My dad. Sometimes he wanders off and forgets how to come back. And Lucy's alone. I have to go." She rushed off, but Andrew's voice stopped her at the door. "Go to Ohio. I'll be here when you get back." Grace turned, stunned by the simple power in his words. "I'll come back as soon as I can." "I know," he said, his eyes holding something close to hope. Back in her room, she threw clothes into a bag. As she reached for her phone, she noticed a folder on her nightstand, papers she hadn't seen before. Her stomach sank as she flipped through the pages. Reports, scribbled notes, and damage logs. Sabotage, broken irrigation systems, improper pesticide usage, all deliberate. At the bottom, a signature she recognized instantly: Michael Monroe. 3 days later, Grace returned to the Monroe Ranch just as the sun dipped behind the Texas hills. The driveway was lined with lanterns, their soft glow leading her toward something unexpected. The smell of rosemary, thyme, and grilled meat greeted her. As she stepped through the house, there was no sign of Mrs. Carmichael or Andrew. "Mr. Monroe!" "Mrs. Carmichael." Silence. She followed the trail of lights to the backyard, and her breath caught. Beneath a jasmine-covered pergola, a long table had been set with vintage dishes, tall candles, and wildflowers. At the head of the table sat Andrew, in a crisp white shirt and freshly cut hair. "Welcome home," he said, voice warmer than she'd ever heard. "How's your family?" Grace blinked, overwhelmed. "My dad turned up at his old workshop. A neighbor found him. Lucy's okay, just shaken." "Please sit," Andrew offered, motioning to the seat beside him. "Mrs. Carmichael made gazpacho. Claims it can cure heartbreak." "What are we celebrating?" Grace asked, lowering herself into the chair. "Tonight's the summer solstice," he said. "They say it's the most magical night of the year." Mrs. Carmichael appeared with a steaming bowl and a wink, then left them alone. As they ate, they talked. Really talked. Not as patient and caretaker, but as two people with scars, trading stories under the soft Texas sky. "I found these while you were gone," Andrew said after dessert, producing a folder. "Papers Michael had hidden. The ranch isn't nearly as bad off as he claims. With smart management, it can recover." Grace hesitated. "I need to tell you something. Before I left, I found proof. He's been sabotaging the ranch, cutting off irrigation, using the wrong treatments on purpose." "I always suspected," Andrew said quietly, "but I didn't want to believe it. Then you showed up and made me open my eyes." Their hands brushed across the table. "Bring your family here," Andrew said, suddenly bold. "The foreman's house is ready. Small, but it has a view and there's a school nearby." Grace stared at him, stunned. "Are you serious?" "I need someone who understands olive trees and broken hearts," he said softly. "You could oversee the mill project, design the new labels, with your arts degree." Their hands touched again. He pulled back. "I can't give you what a real man should," he said, eyes flicking to his legs. "You don't know what I deserve, or what I want," Grace said firmly. "Stop deciding that for me." A silence full of electricity hung between them. In the distance, fireworks popped, the start of the solstice celebrations in town. Then, the sound of a car interrupted the spell. Headlights lit the yard. Michael Monroe stepped out, flanked by two men in sleek suits. "Well, well, romantic dinner for two," Michael sneered. "Sorry to crash the party, bro, but business calls." The men began taking photos of the property with their phones. "These are my Dubai investors," Michael continued. "They're interested in turning this dump into a luxury resort. You sign tomorrow, or the bank forecloses." Andrew's face went cold. But instead of retreating, he looked at Grace, something new burning in his eyes. "Dinner's over," he said, voice like steel. "Grace, would you mind joining me in the office? We've got things to discuss." As she followed him inside, she knew something between them had changed forever. 1 week after that fateful night, the Monroe Ranch felt different. The air was lighter, the land more alive. Grace had begun restoring the northern fields with the help of 2 former ranch hands Andrew had rehired. Young pecan trees and olive saplings seemed to respond to the care, as if they too sensed hope returning. Their mornings followed a quiet rhythm now. Andrew's bath, shared breakfast on the porch, and planning sessions in the study they'd come to share. One bright morning, Grace was explaining a drip irrigation system when the sharp sound of heels on marble echoed through the hallway. A woman appeared, tall, blonde, polished, dressed head to toe in designer wear. Her ice-blue eyes scanned the porch, resting on Grace for just a second before turning to Andrew. "Andrew, darling, I'm back," she sang, leaning in to kiss him square on the lips. "Sophia," Andrew murmured, caught off guard. "This is unexpected." "Clearly," Sophia replied, casting a sideways glance at Grace. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your assistant?" "Grace Bennett. She's my personal assistant and the consultant managing the ranch restoration," Andrew said, formal and distant. "Grace, this is Sophia Arellano, my fiancée," Sophia interrupted, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "Well, ex-fiancée. I suppose that's open to interpretation. Michael told me about your financial troubles. I came to help, sweetheart. Grace excused herself, retreating inside with a knot in her chest. As she gathered the irrigation plans, she overheard the rest of their conversation from the porch. How thoughtful of you to show up now that there's money in the air, Andrew said sharply. Don't be cruel, Sophia cooed. You needed space to adjust, and I needed time to decide what I wanted. Grace couldn't listen anymore. In the kitchen, Mrs. Carmichael chopped onions with uncharacteristic aggression. Miss Sophia's like flies to honey, the housekeeper muttered. Left Mr. Andrew a week after his accident. Now she waltzes back in like nothing happened. Later that afternoon, Grace was reviewing old maps in the library when Sophia strutted in like she owned the place. Can we speak? Woman to woman, she asked, closing the door behind her. I saw how you look at him. I don't know what you mean, Miss Arellano, Grace said steady. Andrew is complicated, Sophia went on, studying her nails. We've had a pattern since college. He hits rock bottom. I pick up the pieces. It's what we do. Grace didn't flinch, but inside she burned. He's my employer. Nothing more. Of course, Sophia smirked. And you just so happen to bathe him, dress him, and redesign his legacy. Very professional. Before Grace could answer, her phone rang. It was her mother. Mom, everything okay? Lucy's voice came through, weak and trembling. Mommy, I have a fever. Grandma says I'm burning up. Panic surged through Grace. I'm on my way, baby. Tell Grandma to call the doctor right now. She hung up and turned to find Andrew waiting at the end of the hallway. Something wrong? He asked, concern clear in his eyes. Lucy's sick. High fever. I have to leave. She rushed to her room to pack. Minutes later, Andrew appeared at her door. Manuel's getting the truck ready to take you to the station, he said gently. But before you go, there's something I need to tell you. She stopped, her heart pounding. The accident, he began. It wasn't what people think. I was trying to impress Sophia, but it was Michael who loosened the girth strap on my saddle. I've known all along. I just kept quiet. Grace stared at him in disbelief. You knew your brother nearly killed you, and you said nothing. He didn't mean to. He wanted to embarrass me, not paralyze me, and I let him carry that guilt. I thought I deserved it. Why tell me now? Because I'm scared you won't come back, he said with raw honesty, and you've taught me silence only protects the one doing harm. Their eyes locked, heavy with everything unspoken. I'll be back, she said, gripping his hand. I promise! Drought gripped Central Texas with a cruel, merciless hand. The ground cracked beneath the sun's fury, and even the oldest trees bent under the strain. When Grace returned from Ohio, Lucy was better, but the Monroe Ranch was hanging by a thread. The youngest trees were drying out, the wells were nearly empty. Andrew spent hours scouring the books, looking for funds to install the irrigation system they so badly needed. Sophia, still residing in the house like a lingering ghost, wandered the halls with bored disdain. It's hopeless, darling, she said one afternoon, sipping iced tea by the window. The land is speaking. You should listen. The land doesn't speak, Andrew muttered. It reacts to how we treat it. That evening, Michael arrived again, this time with his Dubai investors. Mrs. Carmichael, ever the hostess, served a dinner as elegant as the circumstances would allow. Grace sat across from the group, tense and wary, as Sophia observed her like a lion eyeing a mouse. I reviewed the latest offer, Michael announced, raising his glass. $5 million for the whole property. You could retire on the coast, Andrew. Forget this dying place. Monroe Ranch is not for sale, Andrew said steady. Be reasonable, Michael pushed. The drought will finish what the accident started. Even a miracle harvest wouldn't fix this. We have a plan, Grace cut in. We're restoring the oil press and shifting to premium olive oil for niche markets. The investors exchanged skeptical glances. Michael snorted. You're throwing your life away for a handful of trees, he barked. For what? Pride? Or to impress your little caretaker here? The room fell silent. Sophia smiled behind her glass. These trees are the soul of this land, Grace said, rising. They're not just plants, they're your family's legacy, Sophia scoffed. What could an Ohio farm girl know about southern soil? 5 months here and now you're some kind of expert? Grace stood tall. My grandfather was a master presser in Georgia, she said. And I have a way to save the trees. Andrew leaned forward. What way? Nighttime drip irrigation, Grace explained. My granddad did it during the '98 drought, watering only at night when evaporation's low and targeting the deepest roots. It can work, but we need money. Money we don't have, Michael said. I'll mortgage my house in Ohio, Grace offered. It's not much, but enough to start. A stunned hush fell over the table. The investors whispered to each other in Arabic, clearly shaken. Why would you do that? Andrew asked, shaken. Before she could answer, Sophia stood abruptly. This is insane, she snapped. You'd trade a fortune for some fantasy about olives. Wake up, Andrew. This woman's just angling for a future at your expense. That's enough, Sophia, Andrew snapped. We were never re-engaged. What we had ended the day you walked away from my wheelchair. Michael took advantage of the chaos. You've got till the end of the month, he warned. Then the bank takes over. Dinner ended in bitter silence. Grace stepped outside, walking into the moonlit grove. The trees looked like ghosts under the silver light. Behind her, footsteps, but not Andrew's. Your passion's admirable, Michael said, voice unreadable, but you're fighting the inevitable. Nothing's inevitable when people are willing to change, Grace replied. Is that so? He said, stepping closer. Even for paralysis? A chill ran through her. He knows what you did, she whispered. And so do I. Michael's smirk vanished. From the house, Andrew watched from his window, torn between the ghosts of his past and the fragile, blazing hope Grace had brought into his life. Before dawn broke, a beat-up van rolled to a stop outside the Monroe Ranch. The door opened, revealing an elderly man with a weathered face and a little girl with wide, curious eyes. Grace rushed to meet them, hugging her daughter tight, then gently guiding her father out. Dad, this is the ranch I told you about, she said, as if speaking to a child. We're going to stay here for a while. The old man nodded vaguely, but his gaze caught on the rows of trees stretching to the horizon. Trees. So many trees, he whispered, and for a flicker of a moment clarity returned to his face. Mrs. Carmichael led them to the restored foreman's house, simple but warm, with clay tile floors, exposed wood beams, and windows that framed the Texas hills like living paintings. Mom, look, Lucy cried, pointing through the window. There are horses out there. They were just unpacking when the sound of wheels on gravel reached them. Grace stepped outside, heart racing, to see Andrew approaching in his chair, a bouquet of wildflowers in his lap. Welcome home, he said, offering the flowers to Lucy. You must be Lucy. She nodded, studying the man and his chair. Why do you use that thing? She asked with childlike honesty. Lucy, Grace scolded gently. It's okay, Andrew smiled. I fell off a horse a few years ago. My legs stopped working right after that. Does it hurt? Sometimes, but not today. Today, I'm happy you're here. Lucy nodded, satisfied, then wandered over to inspect the wheelchair. My grandpa needs help walking sometimes too, she said, pointing back toward the porch. Can I touch the wheels? While the little girl explored the chair's mechanics, Andrew's gaze found Grace's. She's the reason I'm still alive, he said softly. That woman saved me. The following days blurred in motion. The irrigation system went in, and the youngest trees responded beautifully. Lucy started school in town and quickly made friends. Grace split her time between the mill, her father, who shifted between confusion and rare moments of lucidity, and a growing vision for the ranch's rebirth. Then came harvest night. The first test batch of oil was ready. Neighbors and townsfolk showed up in droves, the buzz of excitement chasing away months of doubt. Even Sophia, still haunting the main house like a shadow, seemed impressed. I never thought you'd actually pull this off, she admitted in the kitchen. Andrew's different with you. Grace didn't answer. Before she could, a scream tore through the celebration. Fire! The press room! Panic erupted. Grace and Sophia sprinted toward the oil mill, smoke already curling from its windows. Inside, workers shouted and pointed. Lucia and Andrew were still in there. "Andrew's inside with the girl," one man yelled. Grace didn't hesitate. She pushed through the smoke, finding Lucy trapped behind a fallen beam, Andrew trying to reach her. "Grace," he shouted, "get Lucy out. The roof's about to go." "Not without you," she cried, forcing her way forward. "Save her," he begged, and then did the unthinkable. With one final surge, Andrew rose, just long enough to shove the beam away from Lucy. His legs buckled immediately, but the path was clear. Grace grabbed her daughter, and with the help of 2 workers, they pulled Andrew out moments before the ceiling collapsed. An ambulance came. At the hospital, Grace sat beside Andrew, hand wrapped in his, praying silently. A doctor approached with cautious hope. "Lucy's fine, just smoke inhalation and scratches, and Mr. Monroe. The scans show something remarkable. There's nerve activity, the paralysis. It was partly psychological." Grace stepped into his room. Andrew was awake, pale but alert. "Why didn't you tell me you were getting feeling back?" she asked, tears in her eyes. "Because I thought you'd stay out of pity, not love," he whispered. "How's Lucy?" "She's safe, because of you." "You're my miracle," he said hoarsely. "Both of you." Spring returned to Texas with a wild bloom, poppies dotting the pastures, green peeking through dry earth. It was the day of the Texas Artisan Oil Festival in Austin, and the whole ranch hummed with anticipation. Grace braided Lucy's hair while music played softly in the background. A knock sounded at their cottage door. "Ready, ladies?" Andrew asked, standing tall in a suit, leaning lightly on a cane carved from olive wood. "Our ride's here." His recovery had been steady and hard-fought. Doctors called it a miracle. Grace knew better. It was the healing power of love and purpose. "Grandpa's having a rough day," Grace said. "Doesn't want to come." "Mrs. Carmichael will stay with him," Andrew said, brushing a kiss to her cheek. "Today's our day." The event was dazzling. Banners waved, booths sparkled with green-gold bottles, and the Monroe Ranch's entry, Monroe Reserve Revival, sat at the center of it all. Grace's redesigned label, sleek and elegant, drew admiring glances. When the MC finally stepped up, the winner for Best Artisan Olive Oil. "Monroe Reserve Revival," applause thundered. Andrew, Grace, and Lucy took the stage together. Holding the trophy, Andrew leaned into the mic. "This award belongs to Grace Bennett, who reminded me that some falls lift you higher than you were before, and to every soul at Monroe Ranch who believed when no one else did." The celebration that night was pure joy. Strings of lights lit the groves, music played, tables overflowed. People danced beneath the stars. "I've never seen the ranch so full of life," Aunt Rose whispered to Grace, watching Andrew sway gently with Lucy, cane still in hand. As the night wound down, Sophia approached with an envelope. "I'm leaving," she said, "and giving this to you." Grace opened it. Property transfer papers. "Half the ranch is mine," Sophia explained. "Andrew signed years ago, but I've sold my share. To you, it's paid for. Consider it a wedding gift." Before Grace could speak, Michael burst in, this time with sheriff's deputies. "I'm here to claim my rights. Andrew's not mentally fit to run this place," he declared, waving papers. Andrew stepped forward, steady on his cane. "You're done, Michael. We know what you did." "Prove it," Michael sneered. Then came a voice no one expected. Grace's father stepped forward, supported by Lucy. "He told me everything during my episodes," the old man said, voice clear. "Thought I'd forget. I didn't." The doctor nodded. "Francis Bennett still has clear moments, and in court that testimony will stand." Michael froze. Then, pale and defeated, he turned to go. "Keep your damn ranch. Dad always loved you more anyway." The crowd cheered as he disappeared into the dark. Later, under the oldest tree on the ranch, Andrew held Grace's hands. "A year ago, you walked in as my caregiver. Now, I can't imagine a life without you." 3 months later, the grove witnessed their wedding. simple, joyful. Andrew waited beneath an arch of wildflowers, Cain by his side. Lucy scattered olive leaves instead of petals. Grace walked down the aisle, her father, lucid, proud, by her side. Then, in front of family and friends, Andrew let go of his cane and walked to meet her. The real miracle, he whispered, holding her hands, wasn't walking again. It was learning how to live. Beneath the trees that had witnessed so much sorrow and rebirth, two broken lives joined as one, rooted now and blooming.